Marcus turned off the kitchen lights one last time. The restaurant was empty and silent. He had been running this place for 15 years, and tonight felt like a funeral. Everything inside him was tired, broken, and empty. He looked at the pristine stoves, the spotless counters, and all the equipment that had once brought him joy. Now it all felt like a prison made of stainless steel and broken dreams. He locked the front door and walked into the autumn night. The cool air hit his face, but it did not make him feel alive. Nothing made him feel alive anymore. Marcus had spent half his life in that kitchen, creating dishes that people loved, winning awards, and building a reputation as one of the best chefs in the city. But somewhere along the way, the magic had died. The food tasted like ash. The compliments felt like lies. The customers felt like judges. And Marcus felt like a failure. The mountain cabin was 3 hours away by car. It belonged to his uncle, who had died 5 years ago and left it to Marcus. The young chef had never used it. He could not imagine leaving the city, leaving his restaurant, leaving anything. But now he could not imagine staying. He packed a single bag and drove into the darkness, not knowing if he would ever come back. The cabin sat alone on a hillside, surrounded by tall pine trees and endless quiet. Marcus unlocked the door and stepped inside. Dust covered everything. Spider webs hung in the corners. The fireplace was empty. But the silence was so complete and so heavy that Marcus felt like he could finally breathe. For 2 weeks, he did nothing. He sat on the porch and watched the forest. He made simple sandwiches for dinner. He slept 12 hours at night. Slowly, his body relaxed, but his mind remained dark. He had failed. That was the truth he could not escape. He had given everything to cooking, and it had consumed him until there was nothing left. On the 15th day, Marcus decided to gather firewood. Winter would come soon, and he would need heat. He walked into the forest behind the cabin, following a narrow path between the trees. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. For a moment, Marcus felt almost calm. He was collecting fallen branches when he heard the sound. It was small and weak and very sad. It sounded like a kitten crying, but something about it made Marcus freeze. The sound came again, this time followed by a strange clicking noise that he had never heard before. Marcus walked toward the sound, pushing through the brush. Behind a massive oak tree, he found something that made his heart stop. A tiny dragon lay on its side in a patch of dead leaves. It was no bigger than a house cat, with wings that looked like they had been torn in several places. Its scales were dull gray and brown, and they looked dry and cracked. The dragon's eyes were closed, and it was barely moving. Marcus knelt down slowly. He did not know if the creature was dangerous. He did not know if it was alive or dead. But something inside him, something that had been asleep for a long time, suddenly woke up. This small, fragile thing needed help. The dragon opened one eye when Marcus touched its back gently. The eye was a pale gold color, and it looked at him with a mixture of fear and hope. The creature tried to move, but it could not. One of its front legs was twisted at a strange angle, and Marcus realized it was hurt. He also noticed that the dragon was so thin he could see its ribs through its scales. Without thinking, Marcus lifted the dragon carefully. It weighed almost nothing, like holding a bundle of sticks wrapped in leather. The dragon did not fight him. It just made that sad crying sound again and closed its eye. Marcus carried the dragon back to the cabin. His hands were shaking, and his heart was pounding. He had no idea what to do. He had no experience with dragons. He did not even know if dragons were supposed to exist in this part of the world. But he could not leave the creature to die in the forest. Inside the cabin, Marcus made a soft bed from blankets in front of the fireplace. He laid the dragon down gently and built a fire. The warmth from the flames made the little creature relax. Then Marcus realized something important. The dragon was starving. He could feel how light it was, how weak its breathing was. It needed food immediately. Marcus went to the kitchen and opened his refrigerator. He had bought basic groceries when he first arrived at the cabin. He had chicken, vegetables, and some fish. Without thinking, he reached for his instincts. Years of training kicked in. He began preparing food with a focus and care that he thought had died with his restaurant. He cut the chicken into small pieces and heated it gently. He steamed some carrots until they were soft. He prepared the fish by removing all the bones carefully. None of this was fancy or complex. He was not trying to impress anyone. He was simply trying to keep a small, broken life alive. Marcus brought the food to the dragon. He was not sure how to feed it. He picked up a piece of chicken and held it near the creature's mouth. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the dragon's eye opened again. Its nostril flared, catching the scent of the food. Slowly, weakly, the dragon reached forward and took the chicken from Marcus's fingers. It was the smallest thing. It was nothing. But as Marcus watched the tiny dragon eat the food he had prepared, something inside him shifted. For the first time in many months, he felt like he had done something that mattered. For the first time in many months, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he had not completely failed. The dragon ate the fish next, then the carrots. When it finished, it closed its eyes and rested its head on the blanket. And Marcus, sitting by the fire, decided that he would stay. He would stay and he would take care of this small creature. He had given up on cooking. But this tiny dragon, hungry and hurt and alone, had given him something unexpected. It had given him a reason to try again. The dragon did not die that night. Marcus stayed awake by the fire, watching the small creature breathe, half expecting it to stop. Every few hours, he brought more food. The dragon ate slowly but steadily, gaining strength with each meal. By morning, it had opened both eyes and was watching Marcus with a clearer gaze. Marcus realized he needed to learn more about dragons. He did not even know what to feed it. The chicken and fish seemed to work, but he wanted to give it better food, food that would help it heal. He spent the first full day experimenting. He tried boiled eggs. The dragon ate them but did not seem excited. He tried roasted meat with herbs. The dragon showed more interest but still seemed uncertain. He boiled vegetables separately and mashed them into a soft paste. The dragon refused to eat it. By the second day, Marcus understood that he needed to think like a cook again. He had spent 15 years learning how to make food taste better, how to combine flavors, how to understand what made people want to eat more. Now he had to apply that knowledge to a dragon. What did dragons like? What made their food appealing to them? He started combining ingredients. He mixed soft roasted chicken with small pieces of fresh fish. He added a tiny bit of honey. When he brought this to the dragon, the small creature's eyes widened. It ate everything in front of it, and for the first time, it made a sound that was not sad. It was almost like a purr, a low rumbling that came from deep in its chest. Marcus smiled. Something inside him that had been frozen for a long time began to thaw. The dragon's injuries slowly improved. The torn wing began to look better. The twisted leg seemed to straighten out as time passed. Marcus created different meals every day, watching carefully to see what the dragon preferred. He discovered that it liked savory flavors more than sweet ones. It preferred warm food to cold food. It enjoyed when he mixed different textures together. And whenever he brought food that particularly pleased it, the dragon made that beautiful purring sound. For days after finding the dragon, Marcus realized he had been cooking more than he had cooked in months. He was planning meals. He was thinking about nutrition and taste and what would help this creature grow stronger. He was shopping carefully when he drove to the nearby village. He was in the kitchen for hours, preparing, tasting, adjusting. And for the first time since closing his restaurant, he was doing all of this with joy. One morning, the dragon tried to stand. It wobbled on its thin legs, and its wings shook with the effort. Marcus rushed to catch it, thinking it would fall, but the small creature stayed upright. It took 3 steps toward him and made the purring sound again. Tears came to Marcus's eyes. The dragon was getting better. It was alive because of him. That same day, Marcus decided to give the dragon a name. It felt important, like naming something meant it was really part of his life now. He sat by the fire and looked at the small creature. Its scales had begun to brighten from their original dull gray. Its eyes were becoming a deeper, richer gold. It was growing stronger each day, transforming from something broken and dying into something beautiful. He thought about everything that had brought him to this place. He had given up. He had lost hope. But then this little creature had come into his life, fragile and needy and fighting to survive. And through caring for it, Marcus had found his own will to survive again. Hope. That was the right name. From that moment on, Marcus called her Hope, and the dragon seemed to recognize the name. Whenever he said it, she made the purring sound. She began to follow him around the cabin, her tiny claws clicking on the wooden floors. She would curl up near the stove while he cooked, resting her head on his foot. At night, she slept beside him on the bed, a warm little lump that made him feel less alone. 2 weeks after finding Hope, something remarkable happened. Marcus was preparing a particularly complicated dish, searing pieces of venison he had purchased in town and mixing them with wild mushrooms and root vegetables. He was working with focus and creativity, thinking about flavors and textures the way he used to think about them before everything fell apart. Hope watched him work from her spot on the floor. As he plated the food, making it look as beautiful as it tasted, he suddenly realized something. He was cooking again. The real cooking. Not the tired, going through the motions cooking of his last years at the restaurant. Not the nervous, experimental cooking of these first days with Hope. He was cooking the way he had when he first fell in love with the craft. He was creating something with love and intention and care. He brought the plate down to Hope, and she ate with the kind of enthusiasm that made his heart swell. She made the purring sound continuously, pushing her small head against his hand as she ate. When she finished, she looked up at him with those golden eyes, and Marcus understood something important. Food was never the problem. His love for cooking was never the problem. He had just forgotten why he was cooking in the first place. In the restaurant, he had cooked for critics. He had cooked for profit. He had cooked for his reputation. Every meal was weighted with expectation and judgment. But here, in this small cabin in the mountains, he was cooking for pure love. He was cooking to keep this small, magical creature alive and healthy. He was cooking because it was the most important thing he could do. Over the next week, Hope grew noticeably stronger. Her wings straightened out completely. She began to move around the cabin with confidence instead of weakness. She would hop onto chairs and tables, exploring every corner. But she always came back to Marcus, always wanted to be near him. And she always got excited when she heard the sounds of him preparing meals. One evening, Marcus sat by the fire with Hope curled up on his lap. He stroked her scales gently, feeling how much more firm and healthy they had become. He thought about the restaurant he had closed, about the person he had been just weeks ago. That person felt like a stranger now. That person had forgotten that cooking was an act of love. This tiny dragon had reminded him. And in doing that, Hope had given Marcus something more precious than any award or review ever could. She had given him back his purpose. She had given him back himself. By the end of the 3rd week, Hope was a different creature. Her scales had brightened to a beautiful deep green color with hints of silver along her wings. She had grown perhaps twice her original size, though she was still small enough to fit in Marcus's hands. She could fly now, though only for short distances around the cabin. She would take practice flights from the couch to the kitchen, her wings making a sound like wind chimes. Marcus had settled into a rhythm with Hope. He would wake early, prepare her breakfast, and then spend the day doing small tasks around the cabin. He chopped firewood. He repaired the porch railing. He cleaned out the old shed. But most of his time was spent in the kitchen, planning and preparing meals for Hope. He had begun keeping notes on what she liked and did not like. He wrote down recipes that made her especially happy. He was learning her preferences the way a good chef learns the preferences of someone they love. One afternoon, Marcus was gathering herbs near the cabin when he heard the sound of an engine. A truck was driving up the mountain road toward his place. Marcus had not seen anyone except the store clerk in town for almost a month. He felt nervous, protective. He did not want anyone near Hope. He did not know how people would react to a dragon. A man in his 60s stepped out of the truck. His name was Robert, and he lived on the neighboring property about 2 miles away. Robert had a friendly face and kind eyes. He was holding a basket of vegetables from his garden. Marcus started to close the door, but Robert had already seen him. The older man walked up to the porch with a warm smile. He said he had heard that someone was staying at the old cabin, and he wanted to welcome Marcus to the neighborhood. He brought tomatoes and squash and fresh herbs because the people in town had said Marcus seemed lonely and might appreciate some local-grown food. Marcus did not know what to say. He was not used to kindness from strangers. His years in the restaurant world had made him cynical. But Robert's generosity was so genuine that Marcus could not refuse it. He invited Robert inside for coffee. Hope was napping on the windowsill when they entered the cabin. Robert stopped dead when he saw her. His eyes widened. He looked at Marcus with a mixture of shock and wonder. For a long moment, neither man said anything. Then Robert spoke slowly and carefully. He asked if that was a real dragon. Marcus said yes. Robert walked toward Hope so carefully, as if approaching something precious and fragile. He looked at the sleeping dragon with a kind of reverence, and then he turned to Marcus with tears in his eyes. He said he had read about dragons in old books when he was a child, but he never thought he would see one. He asked Marcus her name. Marcus told him about Hope. He told Robert about finding her in the forest, injured and starving. He told him how he had been nursing her back to health. He found himself talking about cooking for her, about how this small creature had changed his life. And instead of judging him or thinking he was crazy, Robert listened with genuine interest and care. When Hope woke up, she was curious about the visitor. She hopped down from the windowsill and approached Robert carefully. Robert sat down on the floor so he would not seem threatening. Hope sniffed his hands and his face. And then, in a gesture that made Marcus's heart soar, Hope made her purring sound and rubbed her head against Robert's arm. Robert cried. He told Marcus that this was the most beautiful thing that had ever happened to him. He asked if he could come back sometime to visit Hope. Marcus found himself saying yes. Word spread through the small community faster than Marcus expected. Within 2 weeks, people were arriving at the cabin. Some came out of curiosity about the dragon. Others came because their neighbors had told them about the men who had a dragon and cooked the most wonderful-smelling food. People brought gifts. They brought fresh milk, eggs, honey, and special ingredients they thought might help the dragon grow strong. Marcus was surprised to find that he did not mind the visitors as much as he thought he would. He made coffee for them. He baked bread. One afternoon, someone asked if he could make a meal for their family. Marcus hesitated for only a moment before saying yes. He prepared a simple dinner. Roasted chicken with herbs, fresh vegetables, homemade bread, and a dessert of fruit with honey. He brought it to a neighbor's house and watched their family eat. The joy on their faces reminded him of why he had fallen in love with cooking in the first place. Food was not about impressing people with fancy techniques. It was about nourishing them, making them feel cared for, bringing them together. After that day, people began asking Marcus to cook for special occasions. A birthday. An anniversary. A dinner to welcome a new family to the area. Marcus found himself cooking not in a restaurant kitchen, but in people's homes, working with their ingredients, learning their tastes. And each time, he found more joy in the work. Hope became the heart of the community. Children would come to the cabin after school to watch the dragon. The old people would sit on the porch and tell Marcus stories while Hope rested nearby. The busy parents would come for an hour of peace, watching Hope fly in small circles around the living room while Marcus made them tea and cookies. Marcus realized something important one evening as he sat on the porch with Robert and 2 other neighbors. They were eating fresh bread and cheese that he had prepared. Hope was curled up between them, and the sunset was painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. He realized that he had been wrong about why his restaurant had failed. It had not failed because cooking was the problem. It had failed because he had lost the connection between cooking and love. Here in the mountains, with Hope and these neighbors, he had found it again. He was cooking with his heart, not just his hands. He was creating food that brought people together, that made them feel seen and valued. He was cooking for connection instead of approval. One of the neighbors, a woman named Clara, looked at Marcus with a soft smile and asked what he was thinking about. Marcus looked at Hope, then at the faces of the people around him, and he smiled back. He said he was thinking about coming home. And for the first time in years, he truly meant it. It was a cold morning in late November when the stranger arrived at Marcus's cabin. The man was tall and lean, with a serious face and eyes that looked haunted. He introduced himself as Daniel, and he asked to speak with Marcus in private. Marcus's heart sank. Something about this man's manner told him that this was not a friendly visit. They sat in the kitchen while Hope slept upstairs. Daniel told Marcus a story that made his blood run cold. He said he was a wildlife researcher who had been studying a dragon family that lived deeper in the mountains. The family had been known to the local indigenous people for generations, but they had always remained hidden and protected. Then, 3 months ago, hunters had come. They had killed the mother dragon and 3 of the 5 offspring. They had been looking for dragon parts to sell on the black market. Eyes for potions. Scales for armor. Bones for weapons. Everything about dragons was valuable to the wrong kind of people. Daniel had managed to rescue one of the surviving dragons before the hunters could capture her. He had cared for her injuries, not knowing where else to take her. Then, about 6 weeks ago, the dragon had escaped from the shed where he was keeping her. Daniel had been searching for her ever since. But 2 days ago, someone in town had mentioned a strange man living in the mountains with a small green dragon. Daniel had come immediately, hoping against hope that this was the same dragon. Marcus felt his stomach twist. He went upstairs and carefully brought Hope down. When Daniel saw her, he gasped. He reached out slowly, and Hope, recognizing something familiar in this man, made her purring sound and pressed against him. Daniel explained that this was the daughter of the dragon family he had been researching. Her name, in the dragon language that Daniel had learned, meant something close to hope or light. She was the last of her immediate family. Her siblings and parents had been killed by the hunters. And now, the hunters knew that at least one dragon had survived. They were still searching the mountains, asking questions, trying to find her. Marcus felt anger and fear mixing together inside him. He had saved Hope's life, only to have her taken away by hunters. He asked Daniel what would happen now. Where could Hope go where she would be safe? Daniel looked sad and tired. He said there was a refuge, a secret place deeper in the mountains where dragons could live protected from hunters. It was a long journey, and it was dangerous. But it was the only place he knew where Hope would truly be safe from the people who had killed her family. Marcus's world felt like it was falling apart. He could not lose Hope. Hope was his reason for living again. But he also knew that Daniel was right. A dragon living openly in a cabin near a small town was not safe. Eventually, the hunters would find her. Daniel could see the pain in Marcus's face. He told Marcus something else. The hunters were not careful, and they were not smart. They left evidence. They bragged about their plans. Daniel had been gathering information about them for months. He knew their names. He knew where they were hiding. And he had contacts in law enforcement who would help if someone brought them proof. Marcus made a decision that night. He would not let Hope be taken from him without a fight. But he would not fight alone. He would ask for help from the community that had come to love her. The next morning, Marcus called Robert. He told him everything. He told him about Hope's true nature, about her family being killed, about the hunters who were searching for her. Robert listened without interrupting, and when Marcus finished, Robert asked what he needed. Marcus said he needed to gather the community. He needed to tell them the truth about Hope and ask them to help protect her. Robert said he would make some calls. Within hours, people began arriving at the cabin. Robert came with 5 other men from the town. Clara brought her sister, who worked with the county sheriff. 2 families with children came because they could not imagine a world where Hope was not safe. Nearly 30 people gathered in and around the cabin by afternoon. Marcus told them the story. He told them about Hope's family being killed. He told them about the hunters. He told them that Daniel had information about where the hunters were and what they were planning. He told them that Hope deserved a chance to live, and that the people who had killed her family did not deserve to walk free. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The men talked about organizing patrols. Clara's sister talked about filing reports with the authorities. An older man named Howard said he had hunted before, and he knew the mountain roads better than anyone. He offered to lead Daniel and whoever wanted to go to find evidence of the hunters' camp. Robert stood up and said something that made tears come to Marcus's eyes. He said that Hope had brought their community together. She had reminded them that small acts of kindness could change a life. She had brought Marcus back to them as a man who was alive again, a man who cooked with love and made their town better. And now they would stand together to protect her, because that was what communities did. They protected their own. Over the next 3 days, the community moved with purpose and determination. Howard and Daniel, with help from several hunters from the town, tracked the hunters' camp. They found evidence of illegal activity, equipment used for poaching, and records of the dragons they had already killed. This evidence was brought to Clara's sister, who immediately contacted the state police and federal wildlife agents. Meanwhile, Marcus kept Hope safe at the cabin, surrounded by neighbors who took shifts standing watch. He cooked enormous meals for everyone helping them. He made breakfast for the patrols. He made lunch for the researchers. He made dinner for families who came to sit with Hope and say goodbye, just in case something went wrong. But nothing went wrong. The hunters were arrested at their camp, caught with illegal equipment and evidence of multiple kills. The state police seized their supplies and weapons. The federal agents launched an investigation that would eventually lead to charges against a whole network of black market poachers. On the third evening, as news came that all the hunters had been arrested and taken into custody, Marcus sat with Hope in front of the fireplace. The small dragon was curled up on his lap, and he stroked her scales gently. She made her purring sound, seeming to understand that danger had passed. Robert came in with cups of hot cider. He sat beside Marcus and asked what Marcus would do now. Marcus looked at Hope, then at Robert, and he smiled. He said he was thinking about his restaurant again. Not the old one, with its critics and awards and endless pressure. But something new. Something that would bring people together. Something that would let him cook with his whole heart. Daniel appeared in the doorway and asked if Marcus and Hope would want to visit the refuge eventually, to help other dragons who had been rescued. Marcus said yes. But first, he had something to build here in the mountains. And Hope would be part of it. Spring came to the mountains with the promise of new beginnings. The snow melted from the peaks, and the trees began to turn green again. And in that season of renewal, Marcus opened his doors to something he never thought he would do again. He opened a restaurant. But this was not like the old one. The building was a converted farmhouse just outside the town, with large windows that looked out onto the mountains. The kitchen was smaller, more intimate. The dining room could fit maybe 30 people at most. There were no critics, no reservations list 6 months long, no pressure to maintain Michelin stars. Instead, there was simply good food made with love, served to people who came because they wanted to feel nourished and connected. The sign outside read simply, Hope's Kitchen. And upstairs, in a special room that Marcus had built just for her, the small green dragon made her home. Hope had a cushioned area where she could rest, a window where she could watch the mountains, and always, she could smell the food being prepared below. She spent most of her time in the kitchen, resting on her favorite cushion near the stove, watching Marcus work with those golden eyes that had changed his entire life. The opening day was a quiet affair. Marcus had not advertised much. He had simply told people in the town that the restaurant would open on a Saturday in spring. He was not sure if anyone would come. But when 6 o'clock arrived, people began walking through the door. Robert came with his wife. Clara came with her sister. Howard came with his whole family. Families who had watched Hope grow strong. Families who had helped protect her. Families who understood what this place meant. They filled the small dining room and sat at simple wooden tables covered with white cloth. Marcus prepared a menu that changed every day based on what was fresh and available. That first night, he made roasted chicken with wild mushrooms that grew in the forest near the cabin. He served fresh vegetables from gardens in the community. He made bread from scratch, letting it rise slowly through the day. He prepared a soup from bone broth that had simmered for hours, with flavor so deep and rich that people closed their eyes when they tasted it. But the most important thing he served was not something that could be measured in grams or cups. It was care. Every plate that left the kitchen was prepared as if Marcus was cooking for someone he loved, because he was. He was cooking for his community. He was cooking for Hope, who rested upstairs and depended on him. He was cooking for the version of himself that he had almost lost. As the night went on, something beautiful happened. Strangers began talking to each other. People who might have passed on the street without speaking found themselves in conversation over shared meals. Children laughed. Old people smiled. And upstairs, Hope made her purring sound, as if she was pleased with how the evening was unfolding. A woman named Catherine, who owned a small hotel in town, asked Marcus if he would be open for dinner every night. Marcus said he wanted to start slow, maybe 4 nights a week. Catherine offered to help him create a schedule that would work. She also suggested that maybe sometimes people could meet Hope. Not many at a time, but maybe once a week, Marcus could bring her downstairs so visitors could see the small green dragon that the whole town had come to care for. Marcus agreed. And so, on Friday nights, Hope would come downstairs after dinner service ended. People would sit quietly with her, stroking her scales, listening to her purr. Children would tell her stories about their week. Old people would sit beside her and remember the dragons from the stories their grandparents had told them. Hope became the heart of the restaurant, the reason people came back again and again. Weeks turned into months. The restaurant became busier. Marcus hired 2 young people from the town to help him cook. He taught them the way his grandmother had taught him, before he had lost sight of why cooking mattered. He taught them that food was love. He taught them that every ingredient deserved respect. He taught them that a perfectly cooked meal could change someone's entire day. One evening in summer, Daniel came to the restaurant. He brought with him 2 other rescued dragons, smaller than Hope but equally beautiful. They were shy and careful, not yet comfortable around humans. Daniel explained that the refuge deeper in the mountains was growing. More dragons were being rescued. And he wondered if Marcus would be willing to help. Maybe Marcus could cook for the dragons in the refuge. Maybe he could train other people to do what he was doing, so that rescued dragons across the region could have someone who understood how to nourish them properly. Marcus looked at Hope, who was resting near her cushion. She had been alone when he found her. Now she had a community that loved her. She had food prepared with care every day. She had a purpose in this place, bringing people together. He wanted that for other dragons too. Marcus agreed to help. He began traveling once a month to the refuge, spending a week there cooking for the rescued dragons and teaching other caretakers his methods. The other dragons responded to his care the same way Hope had. They grew stronger. Their scales brightened. And they began to trust humans again, learning that not all people wanted to hurt them. One autumn evening, as Marcus sat on the porch of the restaurant with Robert and Hope beside him, watching the sun set over the mountains, Marcus thought about the men he had been when he first arrived at the cabin. That man had been broken. That man had given up. That man believed that his passion for cooking had died forever. But that man had been wrong. And it had taken a tiny, starving dragon to show him the truth. It had taken finding Hope to realize that hope itself had never really left him. It had just been buried under years of doing the wrong things for the wrong reasons. Robert looked at Marcus and asked what he was thinking about. Marcus reached down and stroked Hope's scales. He felt her lean into his hand. He looked at his restaurant, at the lights glowing warmly inside, at the people he could see through the windows, laughing and eating and connecting with each other over food he had prepared. He smiled and said that he was thinking about how a single act of kindness could change everything. How one small decision to help a broken creature could lead to finding yourself again. How cooking had never really left his heart. He had just forgotten, for a while, that the most important ingredient in any meal was love. Hope made her purring sound, as if she agreed. And as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, casting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Marcus understood that he had finally come home. Not just to a place, but to himself. And it was all because one autumn evening, he had found a tiny dragon alone in the forest and decided to help her. In helping Hope, Marcus had helped himself. And in the process, he had created something far more valuable than any award or restaurant review. He had created a sanctuary. A place where broken things could heal. A place where people could gather and feel nourished, not just in body but in spirit. A place where a human and a dragon could prove to the world that compassion, kindness, and good food could change everything. And that, Marcus thought as he sat in the quiet evening with Hope resting against his leg, was the most beautiful story a chef could ever tell.